Hi, and welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast and get CME for this episode by clicking on the CME link in the show notes. Today, we welcome Michael Bronson. He's an anesthesiologist and healthcare executive. His Kevin MD article is titled, Does Your OR Case Scheduling Process Need a Revamp? Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
We'll get into the article in a little bit. First off, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
Yeah, so I'm a full-time anesthesiologist. I've been in private practice for about 10 years. And I took a very traditional route to get to where I am. So I went from undergrad straight to medical school, straight to internship residency, and then out to private practice. And as well trained as I was to be an anesthesiologist, I came to private practice, and I realized I didn't really know anything about owning a business, which is a lot of what private practice is, being able to manage finances, accounting, grow the business, and maintain the business. And so about 3 years into my practice, I started to get really involved with the group and then the hospital level. And with that, be around some very intelligent people, some very business savvy people. So I started to learn kind of business development processes through them, and through their mentorship, gained a lot of tools and techniques. And to me, a lot of the encouragement and the ideas to go out and start my own business. And so that's kind of where AnesthesiaGo came from, was I saw a problem, I had the tools, the confidence to tackle that problem. And so I went out and tried to accomplish that.
So I hear this a lot about how doctors really don't get a lot of business training, and a lot of doctors, they just kind of go into private practice blind without that business background. So where can they find that business background? Do they need to get MBA degrees? How can they search out some of that business knowledge that you talk about?
It's a great question. And I agree with you. I think we lack in the medical training to give clinicians the tools to run their own businesses. You know, one of my goals early on was to get my own MBA, and to me, you know, the certificate wasn't the reason to do that. It was to gain those business skills. But I think just getting involved early on and being involved in billing and collections and financial planning and on the accounting side, you know, year-end accounting comes along, and to learn those skills and those techniques to do that. So the more you can get involved, the better. So you don't need an MBA to do that. I think just training along some very smart people, some people that know what they're doing is the best way to learn.
So you mentioned you're a full-time anesthesiologist, but you also founded AnesthesiaGo, and talk about those two sides of you, the business side and kind of the clinical side, and how do you manage that day to day?
Yeah, so you know, in doing AnesthesiaGo, there were a lot of synergies with what I was doing on the clinical side. And so one of the tasks I was given in my group was to make the daily schedule. And so the first day I was assigned to do that task, the OR scheduler sent me back a stack of about 30, 35 papers to the OR with a pencil. And I said, well, your job is now to pencil a name next to every case on this schedule. And that took about an hour to do. And I did spend about an hour. I thought I did a good job, sent it back to the schedulers. Schedule went out to
So
everyone.
talk about
And then
that
I got,
process. Why did it take an hour? Like, what was the thought process when it comes to scheduling?
yeah. So when you get those lists of cases and you go through the notes, you know, some patients are going to want a specific anesthesiologist. Some
Okay.
surgeons are requesting a nerve block or a cardiac anesthesiologist for maybe a TEE. So you have to take those into account. You need to know where your anesthesiologists go. Not everyone may go to all of your locations. So if you cover a GI center and surgery centers and hospitals, and not everyone may go to all those centers. Some people may just work in shifts, and so they need to be done at 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock. So you can't schedule them cases beyond those times. So a lot of complexities go into this daily scheduling process. And so as you're putting it together and you're putting names next to every case, you also need to make sure that it makes sense. You're not double booking someone or even triple booking someone, which has happened before in the manual work days. You need to make sure you're making efficient schedules as well. So you're not giving someone a case in the morning and then a huge 4 hour gap in the cases in the afternoon when they could just be doing seamless cases throughout the day. So a lot of complexities go on into that process. And so it was common to finish the schedule an hour later, give those cases to the schedulers, and the schedule goes out, and then you start getting calls and texts that you've made mistakes. And now you're spending another half an hour fixing those mistakes and rearranging. And as you fix those mistakes, sometimes you make other mistakes, and there's really no quality control in that process. And so once I identified, you know, how painful that process was, I looked for a solution, and I did a Google search looking for anesthesia daily scheduling
Sure.
solutions. And I think that's an important point to mention is once you do a Google search for anesthesia daily scheduling, you'll see lot of companies, a lot of products that you think offer that solution. And what you see is the other side of this, the anesthesia scheduling, which is the monthly scheduling, or who's on call and who's on vacation, who's working what shifts each day. But no one automated the daily scheduling part, which was what I was looking for. And so after spending a bit looking for a solution and seeing there was not one on the market, again, with the business confidence and the tools I had gained over my 10 years, or I guess 7 years at that point, I put a team together and we went out to solve that problem.
All right, you talk more about that story in your Kevin MD article. Does your OR case scheduling process need a revamp? So how did this article come together, and tell us the next part of the story?
Yeah, so it took about 18 months to build the product and the algorithms and the structure to develop an OR scheduling tool. And so what we basically are doing is we're taking the daily anesthesiologist and we're taking the daily cases and we're merging those two pieces of information together and giving groups a starting point, if nothing else. And so it doesn't need to be 100% automated. I think some people feel that they're being infringed upon their opinions to leverage the daily schedule by having a 100% automated model. And that's not what we're doing. We're giving people a starting point to start the daily scheduling process and the quality control portions. So as you move cases around on your platform, it'll identify errors that you're creating in that. If you're creating an overlap, if you're creating a situation where the patient requests a different anesthesiologist, it'll alert you to those things where, looking back to the manual process, you didn't get those quality checkpoints. And so you easily make mistakes.
How common is it that patients would request a certain anesthesiologist? Because when I talk to my patients during pre-op, not to say anesthesia isn't important, but they rarely talk about the anesthesiologist in my pre-op. So how common is that?
It's actually quite common. So every day we'll see a couple of requests for anesthesiologists. And I think one of the reasons is the patients are allowed to choose their primary care physician, their surgeon. They research them before they go in. But the anesthesiologist, for the most part, is assigned the night before, and they don't know who that person's going to be. And so once they've had a good experience with one provider, they're going to want to request that provider more times than often for any subsequent surgeries or any surgeries on their family members. Where a lot of times what we see is the nursing staff or people that we work with at the hospital, they'll have certain requests for people because they just get along with them better and they know how they operate.
Excellent. Okay, go on in terms of the solution. Give us a little before and after, because you told us a situation before about how cumbersome scheduling was and how errors can lead to more errors. Tell us how it works now.
Yeah, so the process now, before it took about an hour, the process now takes about 5-10 minutes a night to put that puzzle together. So a very complex puzzle being put together very, very rapidly. And so the process now, I go on the platform, the cases are already pre-assigned to certain providers and takes me a few minutes to glance over the current list of assignments, make any edits I wish to make. And from that, click finalize. It goes to the OR schedulers. It goes to all of my partners. So everyone knows where they're going the next day. It goes to their phone. So they see their individual lineup of assignments for the next day. The board owner gets an individual report to tell them, this is the color-coded map of where every person's going to be that day. So once the add-ons and cancellations and delays occur the day of, they could easily manage that. And then the other thing we built in was the analytics platform. And so we're giving groups the ability to look in the reverse to plan for the future, to say, well, on Wednesdays, we usually need this many people based on our caseload data. This is how many people we should schedule Wednesdays going forward. And so we built a pretty robust analytics platform and dashboard to give groups the ability to have that 10,000 foot view of what the scheduling needs are.
So give us a sense of how big your department is and how many surgeries on a daily basis you have to manage.
Yeah, so our group, we cover about 130 cases a day. It's a level 2 trauma center. And so we deal with add-ons and cancellations quite often. We cover many surgery centers, GI centers. We go to, I think, over 10 different sites in a given day. And again, not everyone goes to all of those sites, which made the complexities even tougher when it comes to daily scheduling.
And when you introduced this platform, what was the response in general from the anesthesiologists and the surgeons?
Yeah, so the anesthesiologist, it's hard to change culture. So some people were set in their ways and they liked the paper and pencil method to do the daily schedule. That's what they were used to, and that's what they wanted to do for a little bit of time. Once we introduced the AnesthesiaGo platform, and when that schedule was made, everyone got the same email with the color-coded map of where everyone's going each day. And it just was so superior to the prior method where you didn't get that. You got the completed schedule from the OR schedulers, but you didn't get the individualized schedule. You didn't get the color-coded map of where everyone's going to be every day. So it didn't take long to create some peer pressure for those that wanted to stick with the pencil and paper method to change their ways to modernize and get to that point.
In your article, you talk about how automation like this can help with clinician burnout. So talk more about that.
One of the pressure points of creating the daily schedule is how much time it took. So it took about an hour to make the schedule, and then it took some time to correct any errors down the road. We're taking a lot of that time and putting it into the hands of technology and minimizing the amount of time it actually takes to make a good, functional, efficient schedule. So the time burden for me on a daily basis, so if you're taking an hour of time every day, 5 days a week, that adds up over the course of a year. So we're minimizing that down to 15, maybe 20 minutes max to create the daily schedule. So all that time savings goes back to the clinician's hands and ultimately goes back to the patient's hands as well, because the clinicians are doing this in between cases, during cases, outside of work. And so it takes away from the ability to really care for patients, to do not meaningless tasks, but tasks that can be improved upon and done in a quicker fashion by leveraging technology and what we have on the market.
In most institutions, is it really a physician who comes up with a schedule? Is that typical of the culture?
Yeah, so in our market research, before we even started the product, we looked at groups on the East Coast, West Coast, all across the United States. And we heard quotes from an hour to 2 hours to make the daily schedule. Sometimes two clinicians would work in tag team to make the daily schedules just so they can get the job done quicker. It's usually the anesthesiologist making the assignments because they know the cases, they know the surgeons, they know what's being asked for. And when people have opinions about what they're being assigned to, it's better to go to one of their physician leaders to express those concerns rather than someone that's not in the arena in putting a target on their back. So it is mostly anesthesiologists making those schedules.
So I want to talk about the kind of the development side. So you identified a problem, you came up with a solution, and did you have the technical know-how to actually build a product? So talk more about that in terms of who did you engage to be part of your team to come up with a technical solution to solve this problem?
That's a very good question. So I had some technical background. I had started my own website in the past and taught myself WordPress and those things, but I didn't know advanced algorithms and those solutions. And so I got two of my great friends involved up in Los Angeles. They run their own company, focus on advanced programming, algorithms, AI, and I presented the problem to them. So I put together about a 15-slide pitch deck, sent it their way and said, hey, look, this is the problem I have. This is what I'm looking for. I'm looking to take the anesthesiologist. I'm looking to take the cases. I'm looking to extract key information from those cases with known information about those anesthesiologists, where they work, what kind of cases they do, and produce an automated foundation so we could work off of, and then save data and so on and so forth. And so I presented the problem to them. It took them about a day to get back to me and talk it over, exchange a couple more thoughts via Zoom and emails, and really started to work on the product from there. So without their background and without their backing, I definitely could not have done this on my own.
So in general, how common is an automated platform like this when it comes to scheduling across the country?
So this is the first time this has been done, automated for daily scheduling assignments. Going back to what we talked about before with the monthly scheduling side, that part's been automated for decades. But the daily scheduling, actually taking the actual cases and the anesthesiologist and pairing those anesthesiologists to cases, this was the first platform to automate that process.
And when it comes to market penetration, has there been good success in terms of convincing other departments about automating the daily schedule?
Yeah, so starting to gain a lot of momentum, a lot of traction domestically and internationally as well. And so we've onboarded a group in Brazil, a group in Canada is being onboarded currently, started to onboard some enterprise providers, academic centers. And so we're starting to gain a lot of market momentum and get that penetration that we were looking for. And that goes back to the changing culture. It's just so hard to change culture. So to go to a group and say, hey, this is what you need as a solution, that's hard to do. But as you start to have changeover in leadership and that younger generation take over from the older generation, they're going to look to leverage the technology that's out there. And that's where we're looking to set ourselves up for when that transition occurs.
We're talking to Michael Bronson. He's an anesthesiologist and healthcare executive. His Kevin MD article is titled, "Does Your OR Case Scheduling Process Need a Revamp?" So, Michael, as you know, AI has been in the news. We read about it every day now. Where else in healthcare do you think AI can benefit us?
I do read a lot about AI in healthcare. I know radiology is seeing a huge momentum with the use of AI to help them with their diagnostic capabilities. And I think you're going to start to see penetration of AI into different fields as well. I don't think it's going to take over the physician's role. I think you're always going to need that human touch, that physician involved, seeing the patient and solving the problems. But I think AI is going to help give clinicians the tools to do that easier, faster, less errors. And that's the one thing we want to work on, in healthcare in general is providing that quality of care. And the less errors we make, the better. I think AI is going to give us the tools to help get in that direction.
And my final question, Michael, tell us some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
Yeah, so I alluded to earlier, I think we are approaching a generational pivot point where younger leaders are starting to take over and transition into those senior leadership roles. And that's kind of how I came along in my position as I transitioned into a daily scheduling role. And I look to leverage technology. And I think that's what we're going to see as those leaders take over. If they grew up with technology, they're going to look to leverage what we have on the market and not accept pencil and paper as a solution for current ways to solve problems. And so they're going to look to leverage technology. And as we start to see that transition happen, you're going to see a lot more groups take on technology and innovation. And it's going to be hard to go back. And I've used the example where it's like going from the Thomas guy to the TomTom. You just can't go back. Once you make that transition, once you see how easier things are with technology, you can't go backwards. You're only going to go forwards. And so I think that's coming up, and that's what we're positioning ourselves to be ready for.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks, Kevin.